turning it into, from residential to M1? Why did they say that was okay?
Well, just from a planning standpoint, you've got R1 zoning that's surrounded on three sides by M1 zoning. It's not ideal anytime you have R1 adjacent to M1. That's a situation we will wind up with, but it's also the situation we have now. The situation we have now has a longer perimeter of R1 adjacent to M1 than you would have with approval of the rezoning. Since the lots are vacant, and I personally know that, I probably wouldn't want to build a house on those two lots with knowing that there were going to be factories and industrial businesses on three sides of me. To me, as a planner, good planning, it makes more sense as M1 than it does as R1.
Are those access roads or just driveways to the...
The one's an access road, well, it just dead ends.
Yeah, dead ends there.
Yeah. There's the house to the left.
To the west.
There's an access easement that is shared by the 4 residential lots up in the northwest corner of that residential area. So those 2 houses, the 3 houses, and then the vacant lot that would complete that square, those all have access through that shared driveway. None of the industrial property nor these 2 residential lots that are proposed rezoning have any access through there. So their access would need to come from somewhere else.
Amy, speaking of access, on page 2, underneath street access, the second, well, I guess it'd be the third paragraph, final approval of this access is contingent upon, et cetera. The last line is the applicant may need to revise access depending upon KDOT's review of permit application. Do we know the status of that?
I don't believe they have resubmitted that application yet. That generally takes place after this point in the process.
Okay.
From the 2010 site plan, they did get approval, so we would expect a similar situation today. There's nothing that's really changed.
And that's really access from Old 56 then, right?
Right. The reason that statement's in there is because it is KDOT who makes that decision and not us.
No problem. Thank you.
But there's no chance of access from the back?
Correct. Not as it stands today because there are no easements that would grant them access.
Okay.
But that could change, and somebody could build duplexes, for instance, on those lots.
Well, they can't build duplexes because there are one.
It's not even rated for duplexes.
What could they put there?
Single-family houses would be the primary use.
Without a rezoning.
I mean, just calling back to the future land use map, with the proposed change, if down the road we decide, kind of looking back to the future land use, that this should be commercial, the process of rezoning that wouldn't be any different with the lots as they are now or as we're proposing them tonight, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Probably make it easier.
Well, I'm just comparing it to,
Well, no, I mean, I think your point's about, because one of the things, I mean, in my mind, I look at this as virtually, if we decide, if these businesses are in place and we've zoned them as industrial, I mean, to me, it's not that easy to go back and rezone them if you have operating businesses there, right?
Well, the example that, and it's not a one-for-one example, but the example I had was the corner of K7 and 135th Street in Olathe. You've got the Walmart on the northwest, and then the Price Chopper and the strip mall on the southwest. Well, on the southeast, there was the concrete for ever and a day. And it eventually, just lost its utility just simply because of its location. It wound up being sold, and then it's now commercial. It's a CVS, pharmacy. So, I mean, if in an evolutionary sense, that's what could happen here.
Right.
You know, I think, you know, from a planning perspective, if we're looking at it as a transition, the R1 to the north is probably of greater concern from a transition standpoint of what it becomes in a rezoning in the future when, you know, as people begin to buy the single-family homes for other purposes. You would assume you'd make it a multifamily transition or perhaps even commercial along that road. But the you know, to Amy's point on 56 with its proximity to Waverly in the intermodal, that may be you know, suitable zoning for that location.
I think if you're talking about at some point down the road trying to force a land use change, I mean, one of the things that, you know, we consider when we consider rezonings, there's quite a bit of case law that indicates, you know, yes, there is probably some truth that it would be a little bit more challenging with, you know, a viable business operating there. But from a legal standpoint, you can't not rezone it if it makes sense in every other way to prevent that development from happening so that it'll make it easier for you in the future. You have to look at sort of, you know, what's a viable land use for that property today. And I think with at least the 2 lots to the north, which is all that's really changing here, the viable land use is industrial, not residential. You couldn't put commercial there today either. Really, these lots today are suitable for industrial uses.
But we still have a defensible case to deny it, because it is R1, it's not properly, it doesn't fit that.
This is not a straightforward case. I mean, there's pros and cons.
But I mean, from a legal perspective, it really isn't a necessity to approve.
I think whatever your decision, as long as you have justification for that decision, that's the important thing.
Do we ever look at the tax consequences, property tax consequences of things like this? The highest and best use, should we?
I mean, we're not doing a
No.
cost-benefit analysis.
We cannot look at that.
No, we should not be looking at that. We have specific criteria that we should be looking at for rezoning, and the tax consequences would not be part of that consideration.
We do consider factors, you know, if it's going to harm the values of nearby properties, that would be a factor that it says in our code we can consider. But we don't look at taxes and that sort of revenue factor.
Don't you think it will harm the property values?
I
of the
personally,
properties?
with the area already industrial, the fact that they're planning on improving the site significantly from what's there today, I don't think that there will be any negative impact to the adjoining properties.
Do we know how many people you're going to have on staff versus what you have now based on your build-out?
We won't be adding anymore. Currently we have about 44 employees.
But you're adding trucks?
No, not adding anything.
Okay.
Currently, we reside in Olathe.
So you're just moving new business to town?
Exactly.
Great answer.
Why is that a good answer? We can't consider the property.
Oh, no, I'm not,
We really shouldn't consider that either, right?
I'm not debating that. I was just asking a question.
Any other questions?
One other question. What happens if we don't allow it, then are they still planning on building?
I'm not sure on that.
No, you said no.
Okay.
While you were looking.
There's not enough room with that.
The site won't allow it, probably, not
That's
that
why
site
we
plan.
didn't do it in 2010.
Okay.
But yeah, their former site plan has expired,
Right.
So there's not going to be any site plan in place, if the rezoning's denied, because the site plan that was approved